The snow outside Cutbank Pass didn't fall like something gentle. It fell like ash, heavy, quiet, endless. The kind of weather that didn't just cover tracks, it erased them, chewed up sound, swallowed distance, and made every pine tree look like a silhouette standing trial under a gray sky. Ethan Cole had chosen this place for that exact reason. No cell service, no curious neighbors, no memories that could find him easily. Just a two-lane mountain road, a rented cabin paid in cash, and a promise to himself that he'd stop running missions even in his sleep. But peace never came to Ethan as a gift. It came like a trap, with the jaws already open. Rex felt it first. The German shepherd lay on the rug by the door, muzzle on his paws, eyes half closed, until they weren't. One twitch, ears forward, nose lifting into the air like a receiver, tuning to a frequency Ethan didn't know existed. Ethan looked up from the cracked mug in his hands. "What is it, buddy?" Rex didn't bark. He rose, slow, controlled, all muscle and intention, and walked to the window. He stared into the snowfall. And then he made a sound Ethan hadn't heard in months, a low, tight whine. Not fear, not excitement. Recognition. Ethan set the mug down carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter the moment. Outside, the only thing visible was the storm, and the faint beam of headlights crawling up the road like something wounded trying to climb. A truck, not a local plow, not a tourist SUV, too high, too wide, too dark. It stopped in the middle of the pass, engine idling, lights still on. No one got out. Rex's tail went rigid. Ethan's body did what it always did when the world turned wrong. His breathing dropped, his senses sharpened, and the quiet part of him began counting exits. He didn't grab a gun right away. He grabbed the collar, Rex, the leash, a jacket, and the old habits he'd spent a decade trying to bury. By the time Ethan stepped out onto the porch, the cold slapped him hard enough to sting his teeth. The storm hissed through the trees. The truck's headlights burned through the snow like two hostile eyes. Ethan stood still, listened. Nothing, no footsteps, no voices, no radio chatter, no crunch of boots, only that idling engine. Rex pulled, just once, toward the road, not dragging, guiding. Ethan followed. His boots sank into powder. The air tasted metallic, like the mountain itself had been struck. As they neared the truck, Ethan saw something that made his throat tighten. The driver's door was open. Just slightly, like someone had tried to get out, and changed their mind halfway. Ethan circled wide, moving on instinct, keeping Rex close. The truck was a late-model work rig, fleet tires, reinforced bumper, a company decal half scraped off the door. On the seat, a hard hat, a radio, and a smear of dark red on the steering wheel. Ethan's eyes tracked down. There were footprints in the snow, staggered, uneven, barely visible. They led away from the truck, toward the guardrail, where the mountain dropped into a steep ravine, and then they stopped, as if whoever made them had vanished. Rex's nose went to work immediately, not casual sniffing, not curiosity. This was hunting. Rex moved along the guardrail, head high, sampling the wind, then stopped at a patch of snow that looked slightly disturbed. He pawed once. Ethan crouched, brushed the powder away with a gloved hand, and found something small, black, and unnatural. A compact emergency beacon. The kind climbers carried, the kind rescue teams used. It was cracked down the side, like it had been stomped. Ethan turned it over. The indicator light was dead, but the casing had been pried open, and inside, where the battery should have been, there was an empty slot. Someone had removed the power source. On purpose. Ethan felt his chest tighten. That wasn't an accident. That was someone trying to make sure nobody got found. Rex growled low. Ethan followed the dog's gaze. Down in the ravine, through the storm. Ethan saw something pale against the dark rock. A hand. Or what looked like one. The snow shifted. Visibility pulsed. Ethan's heart thudded. He moved closer, careful but fast. Rex lunged forward, front paws up against the guardrail, whining hard now, urgent. Ethan climbed the rail and slid down the slope, using brush and rock to control the descent. Snow filled his collar, ice bit his fingers. Halfway down, he realized the pale shape wasn't a hand. It was a strip of fabric, a sleeve. frozen stiff. Ethan reached it and dug with both hands until he hit something solid, a body, face down, half buried, a woman, no hat, no coat, just a thermal layer and a thin jacket soaked through and crusted with ice. Ethan rolled her carefully. Her eyes were closed, lips blue, skin cold as stone. But when he pressed 2 fingers to her neck, he felt it, a faint pulse, so weak it was almost imaginary. Rex pressed his muzzle to her cheek and made that same sound again. Recognition, not hope. Ethan's voice came out rough. "Stay with me." He didn't know her, not in the way you know someone from a childhood photograph or a shared bed, but he knew the kind of life written into the lines of her face. He'd seen it in mirrors. He'd seen it in people who didn't flinch when everything normal people feared became ordinary. Ethan pulled her up, inch by inch, using brute strength and sheer refusal. Rex stayed beside them, teeth gently catching fabric when Ethan slipped. Together they got her to the top, back to the truck, back to the cabin, back to warmth. Ethan laid her on the floor near the stove, stripped off her wet jacket, and wrapped her in blankets. He checked her hands, and that's when he saw it. A bandage around her upper arm, clean, fresh, wrapped by someone who knew what they were doing, and beneath the bandage a faint pattern under the skin, like something had been removed. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He lifted the bandage edge carefully, a neat incision, not jagged, not accidental, surgical. Someone had cut something out of her arm. Ethan's stomach turned cold. Rex paced once, then stopped at her feet and sat, perfectly still, like a sentry. The woman coughed, a wet, broken sound. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. For one terrifying second, she stared at Ethan like she didn't know where she was. Then her gaze snapped to Rex, and something shifted in her face. A flash of relief so sharp it almost looked like pain. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Rex." Ethan froze, because she hadn't guessed. She hadn't said dog. She'd said his name. Ethan leaned in, voice low. "You know him?" Her lips trembled. She tried to lift a hand and couldn't. "Didn't think you'd be here," she breathed. "Didn't think anyone would." Ethan stared at her. "Who are you?" The woman swallowed hard, eyes glassy with fever. "Agent Claire Hart." The name meant nothing to Ethan, but the word agent did. Claire's gaze shifted toward the window, toward the storm, toward the pass, toward whatever was out there. "They're going to come back," she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Who?" Claire's throat worked. "Men in the black truck." Ethan glanced at the work rig parked out front. "That's the truck." Claire shook her head weakly. "No, that was mine. They staged it, wanted it to look like I wrecked, and froze." Ethan felt something old and violent stir behind his ribs. A familiar fury. "Why?" Claire's eyes locked onto his. "Because I found what I wasn't supposed to." Rex suddenly stood, ears forward, body stiff. Ethan heard it too, faint, distant. A second engine, coming up the pass. Claire's breath hitched. "They're here." Ethan moved fast, not panicked, precise. He killed the cabin lights, pulled the curtains, grabbed his pack from the corner where he'd pretended it was just hiking gear. Inside were things he told himself he'd never need again. A compact pistol, a knife, a radio scanner he'd sworn he'd throw away. Ethan checked the window slit. Headlights swept across the trees. Not one vehicle, 2. Both dark. Both moving slow. Rex stood by the door, silent as a shadow. Ethan knelt beside Claire. "Can you walk?" She tried to sit up, grimaced, and nearly blacked out. Ethan caught her. "Okay," he murmured. "Then you're going to do exactly what I tell you." Claire's eyes were dazed but focused. "You're Ethan Cole," she said, voice faint but certain. Ethan's blood chilled. He hadn't used that name publicly in years. "Who told you that?" Claire swallowed. "I didn't come here by accident." Ethan's hand tightened on her blanket. "What did you come for?" Claire looked at Rex again, and her eyes shimmered. "I came for you." Outside, tires crunched snow. Doors opened. Voices, muffled by the storm, but close. Men, more than 2. Ethan didn't wait to count. He lifted Claire, carefully, firm, and carried her toward the back of the cabin, where a narrow door led to a shed and then to the woods. He signaled Rex with 2 fingers. Guard, quiet. Rex moved ahead, nose low, body flowing like water. Ethan opened the back door, and the cold punched him again. The woods beyond were a wall of white and black. Perfect cover, perfect death. Ethan stepped out, Claire in his arms, and that's when a voice cut through the storm. "Ethan Cole!" Ethan stopped, because the voice wasn't angry. It wasn't a threat. It was calm, like someone calling across a parking lot. "Ethan," the voice continued, closer now. "We don't want trouble. We just want the woman." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The man stepped into view near the front porch light. Tall, heavy coat, no visible weapon, but Ethan knew better than to believe that. He held his hands out slightly, palms visible. "Name's Grant," he called. "We can do this the easy way." Ethan didn't answer. Grant's gaze moved to Rex, who stood half hidden by a tree. Grant smiled faintly. "Nice dog?" Rex didn't blink. Grant's smile sharpened. "Agent Hart's been through a lot. She got confused, made some mistakes." Ethan's voice came out flat. "She was dying in a ravine." Grant nodded as if that was unfortunate weather. "Yeah, bad luck." Ethan's hand tightened around Claire's waist. Grant took a step forward. "We'll take her. You stay out of it. Nobody has to get hurt." Claire's hand gripped Ethan's sleeve weakly. "She's lying," she whispered. "They're not private security. They're—" Grant's head tilted. "You talking to her, Ethan?" Ethan stared into the storm and let the silence stretch. Then he spoke softly. "Walk away." Grant's smile faded. "You don't understand the situation." Ethan's eyes didn't move. "I understand you're standing on my property." Grant sighed, like Ethan was being unreasonable. Then he glanced past Ethan into the woods. "You think you can hide out there?" he asked. "In this weather?" Ethan said nothing. Grant's tone cooled. "Last chance." And that's when Rex moved, not charging, not barking, just shifting his body and letting Grant see exactly what he was. A K-9 with training written into his posture. A partner who didn't hesitate. Grant's eyes narrowed. "So it's true," he murmured. "They said you'd have a dog." Ethan's blood went colder. "They said." Which meant there were more voices behind Grant. More people with information Ethan hadn't given. Grant raised his chin. "Fine," he said. "Do it hard." And in the same second, the woods around the cabin erupted with light. Flashlights, red dots. 3 men stepping out from behind trees Ethan hadn't even noticed. Another behind the truck. They'd surrounded him. Ethan's stomach tightened. Not because he was afraid, because he was impressed, which meant these weren't amateurs. Grant's voice came again, closer. "Put the woman down." Ethan looked at Rex, one glance. Rex understood. The dog shifted back. Quiet. Ready. Ethan lowered Claire carefully behind a thick tree trunk, keeping her body shielded. He crouched in front of her. "Stay here," he whispered, "no matter what you hear." Claire's eyes were wide. "You can't fight all of them." Ethan didn't answer that, because he wasn't planning to fight all of them. He was planning to disappear. Ethan moved backward, slow, hands visible, drawing attention away from Claire. Grant's men tightened their circle. Snow fell harder. Rex stayed half hidden, still as stone. Grant spoke, voice carrying. "You're making this worse." Ethan's gaze scanned the line of trees. Distance, wind, cover, and one thing the men surrounding him hadn't accounted for: the terrain. Because Cutbank Pass wasn't just trees, it was old mining land, full of sinkholes, half-buried shafts, and the kind of ground that looked solid until it swallowed you. Ethan had walked it for days since arriving. He knew where the snow lied. He knew where it was thin. He knew where it was hollow. Grant took another step forward. Ethan let his shoulders sag slightly, let his posture loosen, just enough to sell the idea that he was tired, that he was cornered, that he was about to do what Grant wanted. And then Ethan stepped sideways, exactly where he knew the snow was weak. The ground gave with a sudden crunch. One of Grant's men, moving in too fast, lunged to grab Ethan, and his boot hit the same spot. The snow collapsed like paper. The man dropped with a shout into a shallow pit, slamming hard against rock. In the same instant, Rex launched. a silent blur, straight into the nearest attacker's legs. The man went down, weapons swinging wild. Ethan moved like the years hadn't left his body. He grabbed the falling rifle, ripped it away, and shoved the man's face into the snow, hard, then vanished left into the trees. Gunfire cracked, not aimed yet. More panic than precision. Ethan didn't shoot back. He didn't need to. He needed seconds. He needed confusion. And Rex gave it to him like he always had. Rex darted, snapped, retreated, drew attention away, forced men to turn their bodies. Ethan used that opening to scoop Claire up again and run. The woods swallowed them. Branches whipped Ethan's face. Claire's weight dragged at his arms. Her breath came in broken gasps against his shoulder. Behind them, Grant's voice roared through the storm. "Find them!" And then another sound, a sharp, haunting whistle. Not human, a signal. Rex froze for half a heartbeat, ears flicking. Ethan felt it too. Because that whistle wasn't random. It was a command used for dogs. Someone had brought a K9. Claire's voice cracked near Ethan's ear. "They have trackers," she whispered, "and dogs. And they know the mountain." Ethan's jaw clenched. Then Claire added, "Weaker. They know you." Ethan didn't stop running until his lungs burned and the cabin lights were a distant smear behind the snow. He reached an old service road, barely more than a line cut through trees, leading down toward the abandoned mining complex Ethan had seen from afar. Half-collapsed buildings, rusting conveyors, black holes in the mountain where men used to go in, and sometimes didn't come out. Ethan slowed, not because he was tired, because the air changed. Rex's nose lifted again, and Ethan smelled it too, diesel and something else, faint, chemical, like a battery leaking. Claire's eyes fluttered. "Stop," she whispered. "Don't go there." Ethan looked at her. "Why?" Claire swallowed. "That's where they're taking people." Ethan's pulse thudded. "People?" Claire nodded, eyes haunted. "Not just me." Rex growled, deeper now. From somewhere down the slope, a light flickered between trees, a flashlight, moving, hunting. Ethan's mind shifted into the old, cold place. No more running blind. Now he needed answers. He laid Claire down gently behind a rusted piece of machinery near the tree line. He tucked her in a tarp he found hanging from a broken wall. "You stay," he told her. Claire's eyes widened. "No, Ethan, you can't go down there." Ethan crouched close. "You came for me," he said quietly. "Now tell me why." Claire's lips trembled. "They told me you were dead," she whispered. "Or gone, off the grid. But then I found your name in a file that didn't make sense." Ethan's face didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "What file?" Claire swallowed hard, like the words hurt. "A federal contract." Ethan waited. Claire forced it out. "A black program, outsourced, cleaned through shell companies, operating under disaster response, but it wasn't disaster response." Ethan's voice was a low rasp. "What was it?" Claire's gaze flicked toward the mine. "Human extraction," she whispered. "Off-books detention, people who saw something, people who asked the wrong questions, people who were inconvenient." Ethan's stomach turned. Claire's eyes glistened with fever and fury. "And your name," she whispered, "was listed as a liability." Ethan felt the storm inside him go still, a calm so cold it burned. Claire grabbed his sleeve weakly. "They're not here for me anymore," she breathed. "They're here for you." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "Okay." Claire's eyes widened. "That's it?" Ethan stood, checked Rex's posture. Rex was vibrating with focus, ears angled down the slope. Ethan looked back at Claire. "You brought the storm to my door," he said softly. "Now we're going to find out what it wants." Claire's breath hitched. "I'm sorry." Ethan's face didn't soften. "I'm not." He gave Rex a hand signal. "Track." Quiet. Rex moved forward like a shadow slipping into a deeper darkness. Ethan followed. The abandoned mining complex loomed closer, half swallowed by snow and time. The main building's windows were shattered. The conveyor belt was frozen mid-arc like a spine broken years ago. And yet, there were fresh tire tracks in the snow, leading straight into a wide metal bay door that should have been rusted shut. But it wasn't. It was open, just enough for light to leak out. Ethan lowered his body, moving in slow. Rex stopped at the edge of the bay, nose working. Then Rex's head snapped to the right. A faint sound, a muffled thump, like someone knocking inside a wall. Ethan's pulse jumped. He moved toward the side of the building, where an old ventilation shaft sat, half buried by drift. Rex pawed at it once, then looked back. Ethan crouched, brushed away snow. The vent cover had been removed recently, fresh scratches on the metal. This wasn't abandonment. It was a repurposed grave. Ethan eased closer, peered into the vent. Darkness. Then, a whisper. A human voice. So faint it could have been the wind. "Help!" Ethan's jaw tightened. He backed away, scanning. He couldn't breach the bay door alone without announcing himself. But the vent. The vent was small. Not for a man, for a dog. Ethan looked at Rex. Rex stared back, steady. Ethan whispered, "Go!" Rex slid into the ventilation shaft without hesitation, claws scraping softly on metal. Ethan held his breath and listened. Inside the building, something shifted. A man's voice, sharper. "Hey, did you hear that?" Footsteps. Rex moved unseen. Then, silence. Ethan waited. Seconds stretched like wire. Then Rex returned, backing out of the shaft, eyes bright, body tense. And in Rex's mouth, held gently between his teeth, a small object, plastic, black, a key card. Ethan took it, eyes narrowing at the faint logo. Not a mining company, not government. A stylized letter V inside a circle. He didn't recognize it, but Claire would. Ethan pocketed it. He moved to the bay door, staying low, using cover. He edged closer until he could see inside. Bright industrial lights, clean floors, new equipment, generators, and men. Not miners, not workers. Armed guards in dark uniforms, moving with practiced ease. There were cages, not animal cages. Human holding pens made of chain link reinforced with steel. Ethan's throat went tight. Inside one pen, a man sat slumped against the fence, face bruised, hands zip-tied. In another, a woman huddled with a bloodied cheek, eyes wide, breathing fast. Ethan's vision tunneled. Because this wasn't just wrong, this was organized, this was routine. And on the far wall, where an old company bulletin board should have been, there was a whiteboard with names, dates, locations, pickup points. Ethan scanned it quickly, and then he saw it. His own name. Ethan Cole, status. Located. Beneath it, asset, K9, REX, retrieve if possible. Ethan's mouth went dry. They weren't here to kill him, not immediately. They were here to take him, to vanish him, to use him, or to bury him somewhere no one would dig. Ethan stepped back into shadow, breathing slow. He didn't have a team. He didn't have air support. He didn't even have a working phone. But he had Rex. He had the mountain. And he had a woman behind him who had dragged herself out of death to deliver a warning. Ethan's eyes hardened. He signaled Rex to stay. Then he moved to the keypad beside the bay door. He slid the stolen key card. A beep. Green light. The lock clicked softly. Ethan eased the door open just enough to slip inside. Cold air inside was different, dry, artificial, smelling of fuel and bleach. Rex followed, silent as a thought. Ethan moved along the wall, keeping to shadows behind stacked crates marked with false shipping labels. He heard two guards talking near a table. Grant said he'd flush him toward the mine. Yeah, Grant always thinks he's the smartest guy in the room. They want him alive. That's the order. Ethan's hand tightened. Alive. So they could do what they did to everyone else. Ethan's gaze flicked toward the cages again. Those people had been forgotten. Unless someone refused to let them be. A third guard approached, scanning. Rex's body shifted. Ethan held up a fist. Freeze. Rex froze. The guard walked closer, boots squeaking faintly on the clean floor. He stopped near Ethan's hiding spot, sniffed the air like he sensed something off. Ethan waited, still as stone. The guard leaned in. And that's when Rex moved. Not a lunge, a surgical strike. Rex shot forward and clamped onto the guard's forearm. Not tearing, not shaking, just locking. The guard's mouth opened to shout. Ethan was already there. One sharp hit to the throat. The shout died into a wheeze. Ethan lowered the man gently, eased him down behind crates. No gunshots, no alarm, just silence. Ethan looked at Rex, eyes tight. Good. Rex released and sat, waiting. Ethan moved forward. He needed keys. He needed a map. He needed to find whoever was in charge. And somewhere in the back of his mind, colder than the rest, he needed to find Grant, because Grant hadn't stumbled onto Ethan by chance. Grant had walked up to Ethan's cabin and said his name like it was already written down. Ethan eased deeper into the facility. He passed a room with monitors showing camera feeds, roads, trails, the pass itself. They'd been watching him from the moment he arrived. He passed a medical station, clean, stocked, too professional for criminals. He saw sedation syringes, restraints, blood pressure cuffs. This wasn't a gang, it was a system. Then he heard it. A voice muffled, coming from behind a heavy steel door. A woman's voice. Not the woman in the cage. This one was angry, fighting. "I'm not signing anything. Do you hear me? I'm not," a man's voice replied, calm and bored. "You don't have to sign, Ms. Rowan. You just have to stop talking." Ethan stopped breathing, because he recognized that name, not personally, but from something he'd tried to ignore months ago. A journalist. A woman who'd been on the news for 2 days, until she disappeared on a hiking trip, and the story died, quietly. Ethan moved to the door, listened. Rex's ears twitched. Ethan looked at the lock. Keycard reader, same symbol. Ethan pulled the stolen card, swiped, beep, green. The lock clicked. Ethan opened the door, fast. Inside was a small room with a desk, a camera mounted in the corner, and a woman strapped to a chair. Her face was bruised, her lips split, but her eyes were alive. A man stood beside her, mid-turn, holding a syringe. He froze. Ethan didn't. 2 steps, weapon up. The man reached for his belt. Rex hit him low, taking his legs. The man fell hard. Ethan kicked the syringe away and drove the pistol into the man's temple. "Don't!" The man went still, breathing fast. The woman in the chair stared at Ethan like she couldn't decide if he was real. Then her gaze flicked to Rex, her breath caught. "Oh my God!" Ethan moved to her restraints. "Name?" The woman swallowed, voice shaking. "Kara Rowan." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Can you walk?" Kara's eyes flicked down. "Maybe," she whispered. "If you get these off, but listen, they're moving people tonight. Trucks, helicopter. They said transfer window." Ethan cut the zip ties and straps fast. "How many?" Kara's face tightened. "I saw at least 8 detainees, maybe more. They're keeping some in the old shaft." Ethan's stomach knotted. The mine. Of course. Ethan was about to speak when the facility's overhead lights flickered once, then twice, and a voice came over the intercom. Calm, clipped. "All units, we have a breach." Ethan froze, because the voice wasn't panicked. It was controlled, confident, like whoever owned this place wasn't surprised. Kara's eyes widened. "They know." Ethan's mind snapped into motion. He grabbed Kara's arm. "Move!" Rex was already at the door, ready. They stepped into the corridor, and immediately distant footsteps began converging, multiple directions. The system was awake now. Ethan led them fast, staying low, cutting through a storage bay filled with crates and stacked fuel canisters. Behind them, a shout. "There!" A gun raised. Ethan didn't fire. Rex did what Rex always did. Rex launched, silent, brutal, taking the shooter's arm. The gun clattered. Ethan shoved Kara forward, kept moving, grabbed a fallen keyring, clipped it onto his belt. They reached the cage area. The detainees looked up like startled animals. Ethan's voice cut through their fear, low and commanding. "Stand back." He jammed keys into the padlocks. One by one, cages opened. People stumbled out, weak, shaking, eyes wide with disbelief. A man with a swollen eye grabbed Ethan's sleeve. "Who are you?" Ethan didn't answer with his name. He answered with action. "Move, now." He pointed to the rear service corridor. "Follow the dog." Rex took point, nose guiding, body tense. And then the first real gunfire erupted. Not wild shots, controlled bursts. The sound of professionals. Bullets snapped off steel, sparks flew, people screamed. Ethan shoved 2 detainees behind a stack of pallets and fired a warning shot. Not to kill, but to buy a second. Kara hobbled beside him, clutching her ribs, eyes hard. "You're not law enforcement," she panted. Ethan didn't look at her. "No." "You military?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Used to be." Kara's voice went sharp. "They're not going to let you walk out." Ethan glanced at Rex, who had stopped at a metal grate in the floor and began scratching, whining urgently. Ethan's eyes narrowed. A floor grate, an access hatch, the mine's old drainage system. Rex could smell air. An exit. Ethan shouted over the chaos. "Everyone, here!" People surged toward him, desperate. Ethan yanked the grate, locked. He looked at the keyring, tried keys fast. None fit. Footsteps thundered closer. Grant's voice echoed from somewhere behind the gunfire. "Ethan, don't do this! You're making yourself a bigger problem than you already are." Ethan's teeth bared. He kicked the lock hard. No give. Rex barked once, sharp, insistent, then shoved his muzzle against the seam of the grate and whined. Ethan's eyes flicked to a nearby crate labeled thermal cutters. Ethan's mind clicked. He ripped the crate open. Inside, a compact cutting torch kit. Clean, new, the kind used for quick, quiet entry, not demolition. Ethan struck it, flame hissing to life. He burned through the lock. Metal sagged. He kicked the grate free. A breath of damp air rose up, cold, earthy, real. Ethan pointed. "Down, now!" One by one, detainees dropped into the hole, disappearing into the dark. Kara hesitated at the edge. Ethan grabbed her waist and lowered her. "Go!" Rex jumped down. Ethan moved to follow, and then something slammed into his shoulder from behind. Ethan hit the floor hard, vision flashing white. A boot pressed into his back. A voice in his ear, calm and satisfied. "Found you?" Ethan looked up. "Grant." Close now, not smiling. Holding a pistol fitted with a suppressor. 2 more men behind him, rifles up. Grant crouched, pressing the gun lightly to Ethan's head like a reminder. "You could have stayed quiet," Grant murmured. "You could have lived out here until you died of old age." Ethan's mouth tasted blood. Grant's gaze flicked toward the hole. "And now you've opened the cage," he said, almost amused. "Always the hero, even when you're pretending not to be." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "I'm not a hero." Grant smiled, faintly. "No," he said softly. "You're an asset, and you've been missing." Ethan's blood went ice. Grant leaned closer. "You know why Claire Hart came looking for you?" Ethan didn't answer. Grant's voice dropped, intimate. "Because she found out the truth." Grant tapped Ethan's shoulder, right where it hurt. "You were never off the grid," he whispered. "You were released." Ethan's stomach twisted. Grant continued. "Let go on purpose, to see who you'd lead us to see what you'd sniff out, to see which ghosts still followed you." Ethan felt something inside him crack, not grief, betrayal, because Ethan had suspected the world was rotten. But he'd dared to believe his exile was his own choice. Grant's eyes gleamed. "And now," he said, "you've delivered yourself right back to us." A low rumble rose from the hole beneath them. Not the wind, not machinery, a growl. Grant's eyes flicked down, and Rex came out of the darkness like a nightmare. He didn't leap for the throat. He went for the gun arm, clamped, hard. Grant screamed, real panic now, as the suppressor clattered to the floor. Ethan rolled, grabbed the pistol, fired once into the ceiling, loud enough to shock, not to kill, then slammed the pistol butt into Grant's face. Grant crumpled. The 2 riflemen raised their weapons. But detainees were climbing back up, not running, fighting. One grabbed a pipe. Another slammed a pallet jack into a shin. Chaos exploded, raw and desperate. Ethan moved through it like a knife. He shoved one rifle aside, drove a shoulder into the man's chest, took him down, ripped the magazine free. The other man tried to backpedal, and Rex snapped at his leg, forcing him down. Ethan didn't waste time. He grabbed Grant by the collar, hauled him toward the hole. Grant's nose was bleeding, eyes wide with disbelief. "You can't," Grant gasped. "You don't understand what you're touching." Ethan's voice was quiet. "I understand enough." He leaned close, eyes burning. "Where's Claire?" Grant's laugh came wet. "You think she's alive?" he spat. "She was a courier. She did her job." Ethan felt rage surge, but he forced it down into something sharper. He shoved Grant to the edge of the hatch. "Talk." Grant's eyes flicked, calculating. Then he whispered, almost proudly, "She's in the shaft." Ethan's blood chilled. The old mine shaft. Ethan looked down at the hole, the escape route, the only way. He could leave now with the detainees. Or he could go deeper. He looked at Rex. Rex's eyes didn't waver. Ethan made a decision so fast it felt like it had been made years ago. He grabbed Grant's pistol, shoved it into Kara Rowan's hands. Kara blinked. "You trust me?" Ethan looked at her. "You want a story that matters?" he asked. "Stay alive and tell it." He nodded toward the hole. "Get them out. Follow the drainage tunnel. South. It opens near the ravine. Keep moving." Kara's face tightened. "What about you?" Ethan turned. "What about Claire?" Kara swallowed. "Ethan?" Ethan didn't let her finish. He looked at Rex. "Down!" Rex dropped into the hole. Ethan grabbed Grant, dragged him toward a side corridor where an old elevator shaft led deeper. Grant fought weakly, coughing blood. "You're dead if you go down there," he rasped. Ethan's voice was flat. "Then at least I'll be honest about it." They descended into the mine's lower levels through a stairwell that smelled like wet stone and old rust. The lights down here were dimmer, backup power, emergency only. The air grew colder, heavier, and, somewhere deep in the dark, Ethan heard a faint sound, a tapping, like someone trying to send a message through metal. Rex stopped, ears forward. Ethan's pulse hammered. They followed the sound to a reinforced door welded into old rock. Not original mine construction. New? Industrial? Grant's breath came in wet gasps. "You open that," he whispered, "and you'll wish you hadn't." Ethan didn't answer. He shoved Grant down, hard, and pressed his ear to the door. A voice, faint, ragged. "Ethan?" Ethan froze, because it wasn't Claire. It was Claire calling him, by name. Ethan's stomach dropped. He stared at the door like it might explode. Rex whined, urgent. Ethan forced himself to breathe. Then he spoke, low. "Claire, it's Ethan." A broken laugh from the other side. "You actually exist," she rasped. Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm opening it." Claire's voice snapped. "No, listen to me. They rigged it. If you breach loud..." Ethan glanced at the hinges, the seams, the fresh bolts. Trap. Of course. Ethan looked at Rex, then at Grant. Ethan's voice became dangerous. "You brought me here," he said softly. "Now you're going to help me open it." Grant blinked, blood in his teeth. "Or what?" Ethan leaned in. "Or Rex takes the other arm." Grant's eyes flicked to the dog. He swallowed. Ethan forced Grant to the door panel, a keypad. Grant's hands shook. "Code," Ethan said. Grant hesitated. Ethan nodded once at Rex. Rex's lips lifted, just a little, showing teeth. Grant whispered a sequence. Ethan watched the panel. Green light. The lock clicked softly. Ethan didn't swing the door open. He eased it, slow, careful, just enough to look inside. A small room, concrete walls, a single chair, and Claire Hart, alive, but barely. Her face bruised, hair matted with sweat, a fresh bandage on her arm where something had been removed. But her eyes were still sharp, still angry, still refusing to die quietly. Ethan stepped in. Rex followed, pressing close to Claire like he'd known her longer than Ethan had. Claire's breath hitched when she saw the dog. "Good boy," she whispered, voice breaking. Ethan moved fast, cutting her restraints. Claire winced, but she didn't cry out. She stared at Grant, who was on his knees in the doorway. "Him!" Claire spat, voice rough. "He's not the top." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Who is?" Claire swallowed hard. "Vanguard recovery isn't recovery," she rasped. "It's a funnel. They disappear people. Then they sell what they take. Data, access, skills." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Skills?" Claire's gaze locked on Ethan's. "They built a list," she whispered. "Operators, contractors, people who know how to break things, people who can't be tied back to anyone." Ethan's blood chilled. Claire's eyes shimmered, not with fear, with fury. "And you," she whispered, "were the missing piece." Ethan stared at her. Then Claire leaned in closer, voice shaking. "They're coming," she rasped. "And Ethan, They already called the helicopter. As if the mountain wanted to confirm her words, a distant thump began outside. Rotors, coming fast. Ethan's mind snapped into motion. He lifted Claire carefully. "Can you move?" Claire nodded weakly. "I can, but Ethan, there's something you need to know." Ethan looked at her. Claire's hand tightened on his sleeve. "I didn't find you by luck," she whispered. "I found you because someone wanted me to." Ethan froze. Claire's eyes were haunted. "They fed me the trail," she breathed. "I thought I was hunting them, but they were using me to flush you out." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Who fed you?" Claire swallowed. "A man named Marcus Thorne." Ethan went still. Because that name belonged to someone Ethan had trusted once. A mentor. A voice from an older life. A voice Ethan hadn't heard in years. Ethan stared at Claire, chest tight. "You're sure?" Claire nodded, tears burning in her eyes. "He's connected," she whispered. "And Ethan, I think he wants you alive more than they do." The rotors grew louder. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere above, alarms began to wail, delayed but real. Ethan looked at Rex. Rex stared back, steady. Then Ethan looked at Grant, still on his knees, bloodied and shaking. Ethan's voice dropped into something cold and final. "You're gonna walk us out." Grant's eyes widened. "They'll shoot me." Ethan nodded once. "Then you better walk fast." Ethan moved. Rex moved. Claire clung to Ethan's shoulder, breathing hard, refusing to collapse. They climbed back toward the main level as the facility roared to life, men shouting, boots pounding, radios screaming orders. The escape tunnel was gone. Too far. Too slow. They needed another way. Ethan's mind flashed to the one thing every system hated: unpredictability. He dragged Grant toward the fuel storage bay. Grant struggled. "What are you doing?" Ethan didn't answer. He shoved open a heavy door. Inside were generator tanks, fuel drums, and a large ventilation shaft leading straight up toward the mountain's surface. Rex's ears flicked. He could smell air. Ethan grabbed a chain, yanked open an access panel, and shoved Grant forward. Grant stared up. "You're insane." Ethan's eyes burned. "I've been called worse." The rotors were directly overhead now, shaking the building. Ethan heard the first burst of gunfire somewhere above. They were out of time. Ethan shoved Grant up into the shaft, then lifted Claire, teeth clenched, and began climbing. Rex climbed behind them, claws scraping metal. Above, the shaft opened into a maintenance hatch behind a rock outcropping near the ravine. Snow blasted them like a wall. The helicopter hovered nearby, lights sweeping the complex. Men shouted below, spotting movement. A rifle cracked. A bullet punched stone beside Ethan's head. Rex snarled, body tensing. Ethan dragged Claire forward, using rocks as cover, toward the ravine path that led downhill. Grant stumbled ahead, panicked. Another shot. Grant flinched. Then, suddenly, his body jerked. A clean hit. Grant dropped into the snow like a puppet with its strings cut. Ethan didn't stop. He couldn't. Claire's breath was ragged. Rex stayed close, shielding her with his body whenever the lights swept their way. They reached the ravine edge where the drainage tunnel opened, dark, narrow, half-iced. Kara Rowan was waiting there. Her face was smeared with grime. Her hands shook around Grant's pistol. But she was alive. And behind her. Detainees huddled in the trees, watching Ethan like he was a ghost. Kara's eyes widened when she saw Claire. "You got her." Ethan didn't slow. "Move!" he snapped. "Now!" They plunged into the ravine trees as the helicopter's spotlight cut across the snow like a blade. And then, another sound. A whistle. That same sharp command whistle. From closer now, and Rex stopped dead. His ears pinned. Ethan's chest tightened. Because from the ridge above, a dark shape appeared. Not a man, a dog, a K9, bigger than Rex, black coat, handler behind it, and the handler's voice carried down. Calm, familiar. "Ethan!" Ethan went still, because he knew that voice. Even after years, even after silence. Marcus Thorne stepped into the light. Older, grayer, but standing with the same quiet authority, the same mentor's posture, the same eyes that always looked like they were measuring the cost of decisions. Thorne's gaze flicked to Rex, then to Claire, then to Kara and the detainees. He sighed, almost sadly. "You made a mess," Thorne said. Ethan's voice came out low and sharp. "You set me up." Thorne didn't deny it. "I tried to protect you," he said calmly, "but you keep refusing to stay buried." Claire's voice rasped beside Ethan. "He's the one," she whispered. "He's the top." Thorne stepped closer, hands open, like Grant had done earlier. "Come with me," Thorne said. "No one else has to die." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And if I don't?" Thorne's expression hardened. "Then you force my hand." Ethan looked at Rex. Rex stared up at the ridge, body vibrating. Not fear, readiness. Ethan's voice dropped into something quiet and lethal. "You taught me something once," Ethan said. "You said the worst enemy isn't the man who hates you." Thorne's eyes narrowed. Ethan continued. "It's the man who smiles while he chains you." Thorne's face tightened. Then he nodded once, like Ethan had answered a test. "Take him," Thorne said softly. The Black K-9 launched, fast, disciplined, a trained missile. Rex met it halfway. Two bodies collided in the snow with a savage thud. Teeth, growls, muscle, control. Ethan shoved Claire toward Kara. "Get them out!" he snapped. Kara grabbed Claire, dragging her down the ravine path. Detainees scrambled after. Ethan stayed. Because Thorne wasn't just a man with a gun. He was a man with resources. And Ethan understood something now, sharper than the mountain air. This wasn't a rescue story. This was the beginning of a war Ethan hadn't known he was drafted into. Ethan moved forward, weapon up, not to shoot Thorne. Not yet. To buy Rex time. To buy Claire life. To buy the truth a chance to survive long enough to be heard. Thorne watched him approach through the swirling snow. And for a moment, just a moment, Thorne's expression softened. Almost regret. "You should have stayed gone," Thorne murmured. Ethan's eyes burned. "I tried," he said. Then he raised the pistol, not at Thorne's chest, at the helicopter's spotlight. One shot. Glass shattered. The light died. Darkness swallowed the ravine again. And in that darkness, Ethan and Rex moved like the storm itself. Not running anymore. Not hiding. Hunting. Because Ethan finally understood the twist he'd never wanted. He wasn't being chased because he'd done something wrong. He was being chased because he was useful. And Ethan Cole had spent too many years being used. Not anymore. Not while Rex still breathed beside him. Not while Claire Hart's warning still burned in his chest. Not while there were cages in the snow and names on whiteboards and men like Thorne who called it protection. Somewhere down the ravine, Kara Rowan's voice trembled as she urged people forward. Somewhere behind Ethan, Thorne's boots crunched closer. And somewhere in the darkness between them, Rex broke free from the Black K-9, blood on his muzzle, eyes locked on Ethan like a promise. Ethan exhaled once. Cold air, hot resolve. Then he vanished into the trees with his dog at his side, carrying a truth that was going to get them both killed, or burn the whole machine down trying.